Chris and Chris Talk Movies.
Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Chris Ferry, and of course, this is my co-host.
My name is Chris Huddleston.
And today we are very excited to be talking to you about the 1998 film Zero Effect. Do you have a synopsis for us, Mr. Huddleston?
I do. As we said, this is a 1998 film. It was the first film written and directed by Jake Kadan, son of Lawrence Kasdan, and it stars Bill Pullman, Ben Stiller, Ryan O'Neal, Kim Dickens, and the synopsis is as such. Private investigator Daryl Zero, Bill Pullman, is one of the finest sleuths in the world, but also one of the most eccentric. A recluse prone to odd behavior, Daryl utilizes his assistant, Steve Arlo, Ben Stiller, as his face to see clients. When businessman Gregory Stark, Ryan O'Neal, falls victim to a blackmail plot, he employs Daryl to find the culprit. Daryl starts to home in on Gloria Sullivan, Kim Dickens, as a suspect, but he also finds her attractive, which complicates the case. So you were unfamiliar with this film, correct?
Never heard of it, never seen it.
Okay, so you go first.
Yeah, it felt like someone's first movie to me. It looked good. It was well shot. I think it was well cast. And the script was pretty good. I feel like the things for me that made it feel like someone's first film had to do with sort of pacing and clarity. And there were some script elements that felt a little self-consciously clever. Like the word choices that some characters had as I don't have examples to cite, but it just, at various places through the script, it felt written. The dialogue felt written. And I think that, it's a detective story, so they got to crack the case. There's that. There's the femme fatale. I mean, there's a lot of classic elements of that genre here, but it also plays for laughs sometimes. There's an element of the absurd, right? There's sort of an absurdist streak throughout. Ben Stiller looking really young here. And, I like Bill Pullman too. I felt like by the end of the movie, we were supposed to feel like these two were kind of Sherlock and Watson, like they were this team that just wouldn't, that Sherlock couldn't do what he did without his Watson, right? And I didn't feel like they had that chemistry at all in the movie. I didn't feel like it was difficult for Ben Stiller. Or say, we're going to spoil this movie. So if you're interested
25 years old,
you don't want to hear what happens, right? So when Ben Stiller leaves, that didn't feel difficult for me. It didn't feel particularly difficult for Bill Pullman, even though he, his lines said, "What am I going to do without you?" Right? And I didn't feel any chemistry between the Kim Dickens character and Bill Pullman either. And you're supposed to. They fall in love. She's the only woman he's ever loved, apparently, if we can believe him in the movie. So it's not that people did a bad performance. I would chalk that up to a first-time director who isn't, you get a take and then you don't move on. You just go, I'm not getting what I need to see here. So let's stop. Let's direct. Let me get in there and see if I can't help you out. What did you think? You'd seen it a while ago.
Yeah. So I saw this around the time it was originally released. So either on home video or one of the movie channels. And I'm going to say this was probably, I caught it on the movie channel and had not seen it since then. I remembered liking it, but I remembered very little about it. So Bill Pullman's character is so as we kind of said, it's self-professed, I guess, but he's very much like a Sherlock Holmes in that he's supposed to be this genius detective. But otherwise his life is a mess. He lives in this penthouse apartment in LA, but he like does amphetamines and stays up for days at a time and all of this. And so it has a Sherlock Holmes feeling to it, a more comedic sort of Sherlock Holmes. It also seems a bit like a quirkier, somewhat less comedic Fletch. I don't know if Fletch ever like kind of crossed your mind watching this, but
that sense of like sarcastic comedy, did that sense of like of wise ass, like that's true north in terms of what's funny, which again felt like the writer to me. I'm like, you're some 20 something, or maybe Kasdan wrote it himself, but somebody writing being like, this is hilarious, and you're like, I don't know, kid.
It's very much, you said it feels written. There are films that you see where, even sometimes films that have really great dialogue, but they never sound like something someone would say in real life.
Right.
And this movie has a lot of that. I felt like
right off the top, his pitch, we open in some businessman's office, and the Watson character, who is Ben Stiller, is making this pitch of why he should hire his employer, the Bill Pullman character. And he's giving this sort of resume, is like he is, he has unparalleled, perception, and just nobody talks that way, and it's this long monologue of this sort of, and all the actors do a good job of trying to make it sound naturalistic, but it just clinks on the ear,
Yeah, for sure. And he also, so Bill Pullman is supposed to be, Ben Stiller is his assistant because Bill Pullman he's very uncomfortable with people. He's probably, almost kind of agoraphobic. He doesn't want to leave his home. He doesn't like to talk to people. And he's supposed to be a master of disguise, I guess. But all they do really is just like, he'll have a beard or a mustache or something. And, I think that was supposed to be funny, and that made me chuckle a bit at times.
It was supposed to be a running gag where it's like the bell boy or something, would step up until he's right over your shoulder being like, meet me at the car. You're like, oh, it's him. That's what it's supposed to be. But it really just looks like Bill Pullman and a bunch of fake beards, goatees, mustaches, and wigs.
Yeah. So I don't know if you are supposed to really buy that he is this amazing detective. I mean, he makes a lot of money. One thing that's interesting is,
I think you are. I think you're supposed to buy it. So.
You are, and this is something I feel like I say this every week, so I don't want to sound like people that listen to this regularly. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but this again is one of these things of how the movie business has changed in the last 20, 25 years. This was by no means a hit. I don't know what the budget was, but I looked up, it made about $2 million.
You shock me, sir.
Yeah. But one thing I think is a little bit of refreshing about this, going back and watching this now, is this, I guess, was an original story by Jake Kadan, but it feels a bit like this could have been based on a book, as the Fletch films are. because you're sort of just dropped into the middle of it. You get almost, other than just brief little sketches, you get almost no background on either of them. And there's a running voiceover at times with Bill Pullman, and he'll allude to other cases, the case of the guy who didn't tie his shoes or something like that.
Right, and those are funny. Those are funny cases too. Yeah.
So there are little brief sketches, but I feel like if this were a movie now made today, they would do flashbacks and show you some of this, or they would maybe even start it as an origin story, thinking like, oh, maybe we'll do another one of these. So, that's that felt a little bit refreshing to me. I think this period in Ben Stiller's career is interesting because at this time he was doing kind of a lot of indie stuff like this. This was before he started doing the Meet the Fockers and the Night at the Museum and things like that. So he was a little like, he did The Cable Guy, which I've never actually seen that movie before. But he did another one. Have you ever seen?
That was Ben Stiller?
Ben Stiller is Jim Carrey is the Cable Guy, but Ben Stiller is the person that he's going to.
I don't know why I thought it was Matthew Broderick. I've never seen it either. We should do that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would definitely be a good one to do sometime. But he did another film. Have you ever seen Permanent Midnight?
That's the one where he's a writer on Alf.
Yeah, and it's based on the guy's actual.
I haven't seen it. I'm more familiar with that movie, but I haven't seen it.
He's a heroin addict in it, so it's kind of interesting to see. I don't know that that's a role that Ben Stiller would do now, and it's
I think to some acclaim. I mean, I think he's got lauded for that performance.
Yeah, it's worth watching. I mean, but this was right. I think it was the same year. I think it was 1998. But anyway, he was doing some pretty interesting stuff at that time. And also you kind of forget how, and he still has an ongoing good career, but you kind of forget how good Bill Pullman was too. I think much of your enjoyment of this film is how much you can tolerate the quirkiness of his character, because he's just so uncomfortable. And once he gets involved with the love interest, Gloria, and what's her name again? Anyway, that's just the interaction between them is so awkward.
Very stiff.
And you've got some movie logic in there of people knowing each other for 2 or 3 days and then falling in love. Does that happen in real life? Maybe, right. But not the way it does in films. But at times other than he's a handsome guy, but you're just thinking, why would this woman fall in love with this guy? He's right. So awkward. And there are periods of them just kind of looking at each other,
Right. Yeah. I think he plays the discomfort, and it's difficult to watch.
Mm-hmm.
It's uncomfortable to watch. And I think I think since this movie was made, we've seen a number of reboots of Sherlock Holmes, right? We've seen big screen adaptations of Sherlock Holmes in different styles. We've seen small screen adaptations. I think that the Benedict Cumberbatch and what's his face
from Lord of the Rings,
British television series was excellent, right? So I think that whether or not you're familiar with reading the Sherlock Holmes books, the idea that Sherlock Holmes is a socially difficult guy, an exacting and demanding guy to work for, and Watson has a wife, right? Sherlock is single, but Watson is sort of his work wife, right? He always wants, but Watson has a wife, and that's his relationship with Sherlock is a strain on his relationship with his wife, all of which we see here.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this started with Sherlock Holmes, but what doesn't square to me in terms of the Bill Pullman character is that he's erratic, he's socially, and Ben Stiller even says this, it's like when he's off duty, when he's impossible, right? Won't even leave the house, like he's on the spectrum, agoraphobic, all of these different, he's an addict, it's everything. But when he's on a case, he's like a master of disguise, and it just doesn't, I can't conceive of a human being, even in a comedy. And this isn't really a comedy, although it sort of is. It's like, is this a comedy or is it what is it? It's trying to be several things. I just couldn't get my head around a character that was both things, that was so paranoid and sort of agoraphobic and sort of on the spectrum, and it's very vague, right? So there's no real research. Doesn't feel like anybody cared to try and make this a real person. They're just like, oh, he's everything. And you're like, okay. First of all, you can't play that, right? And second of all, it's just doesn't feel real. And then that he could also be as effective as he is in just navigating society and blithely lying like he's very charming when he's on the job. And I'm like, so how is this asshole, basically, and dysfunctional in many ways guy, how is he capable of being such a manipulative, successful, social operator in that way? He socially engineers getting answers out of a lot of people. And you're kind of like, well, could a guy described as the former also do that? Because it didn't feel real to me.
There's one part where in a voiceover where he says something about, it's more or less like, I'm paraphrasing here, but he has to pretend to act like a normal person and understand what normal people are like, or what just people in general are like, because it's when he's on the case and he's going and he's following Ryan O'Neal around and he's going to his gym, and this is where he meets this Gloria who he falls in love with. But the second he's away from that and goes back to his hotel, it's just like it's completely exhausted him to do anything that a normal person would do, And at the beginning of the movie, where we're introduced to him, where Ben Stiller goes to his penthouse apartment, he tells him that he's been taking methamphetamines and he hasn't slept for 3 days. But he takes this case, and it's like the next morning they're going to have to get on a plane. And he's like, well, I got to go to sleep now. I was just thinking, if you stayed up for 3 days I've never done that before. I've never stayed up for 3 days doing methamphetamines. But, if I get like a couple hours less sleep than I normally do, I'm just wiped out the next day. You know what I mean?
I do.
And this is, again, a comedy that, 90 minutes or so is really great for comedy, but this is almost 2 hours long. But with those 2 hours, there's still a lot that is left undeveloped. So you have all this time that you could really sort of delve a bit more into how this guy works and maybe make it a little more believable, but that kind of never really happens.
Yeah, and there are a handful of places where the story just doesn't make any sense, and you can feel the thing kind of trying to bend it in half and stuff it in. Like, he tells her that he's an accountant at one point, and she says, oh, will you help me with my taxes? And he says, sure. I mean, come on. Nobody for that alone is just stupid. It's like, well, I'm not really that kind of accountant. I'm here at this convention. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, I'll help you with the taxes. He knows nothing about taxes, right? They make a hay about this. And so he sits down to do her taxes, and she's clearly suspicious of him. So she says, what about this bogus exemption? It's some Star Trek city name. I mean, it's like, what about the Cardaxian. It was the stupidest thing. And he bluffs. He goes, "Oh, well, that's," and I'm just like, what are we watching? What movie is this now? This does feel like Fletch. This feels like, except that whatever else Chevy Chase is he can pull off that kind of baloney in a hugely entertaining way, right? And it's all that kind of baloney in those movies. And in this one, it's like, oh, and then they're in by the end, they're falling for each other. So they say, we don't feel it. They're at like a 50s diner on either side of a chocolate shake with 2 straws. Okay. Why not just a plate of spaghetti where you just lady in the grill? I mean, like, what is happening?
Well, and when she asks him about the taxes, so this pretty much complete stranger comes in, she just knows him because she saw him at the gym and spoke to him for a moment. And then she asks him to, so initially she asks him to come to her apartment, and you think like, oh, she's really interested in this guy. And then she says, oh, you could, since you're an accountant, could you do my taxes for me? And then, you can see because he is clearly attracted to her as well. And you can see his heart sink a little bit. It's like, oh, maybe there is no interest there. But then when she brings up whatever it is, the Cumberbatch 3 deduction or whatever, and he explains that whole thing, you're expecting her to say, well, there is no Cumberbatch 3 direction.
Call him on it. Right.
Who are you? But I guess by the end of the movie, I guess she knew that he was lying, that, she had just made this up. And
by the end,
she's like,
he knew, and he knew that she knew. And
yeah.
And I actually like that at the end, they're both, without having explicitly said it, they both understand that to be fair to the movie. So to be fair, he's at the gym where his client works, and he's observing his client. And there is just a completely innocent, random interaction between him and her at the counter to sign up for a massage. Cause he's like, he's trying to talk to the masseuse that gives a massage every morning or whatever. And there's a spark, there's something about her that strikes him at that moment. And that's important because we see her again shortly and unexpectedly, and we need to be able to recognize who it is. So they have that first interaction, and that felt very natural and very plausible to me. Then he goes and stakes out the drop, right? He stakes out the first drop of this blackmailer, and he's watching to see who's going to pick up the dropped cash. And there's a couple of red herrings, but then it's her. Mm-hmm. It's her that goes in, and it's a great exclamation point, because we're like, oh, that's the girl from that first time we see her. We're like, well, how is she going to come back into this? And then it's like, oh, that's how she's coming back into this. So she doesn't see him. So she doesn't know that this random guy, she doesn't know anything yet. But that suddenly she is central to his case. And not just because he thinks she's interesting, but because she is the person, either the person who's blackmailing his client or directly involved with somebody else who is, right? So he starts kind of orchestrating ways to kind of cross her path and get to know her a little bit. And I think that all unfolds. But saying I'm an accountant, again, felt like comedy. It's like, what do you do? I am a chimney sweep. You're an accountant. Why would you say that you were an accountant? He doesn't look like an accountant, right? His earlier story was, I'm an architect. Why don't you just stick with that? You've already told somebody else in the gym you're an architect. So just stay an architect, right? Why elaborate the lie?
Yeah. And also nobody, if you're this, brilliant, you have these brilliant powers of deduction and everything. And an architect it's unlikely that anybody is going to say, hey, can you come and redesign my house for me? You know, I don't know. She was, so I'm going to have to look her up again because I already forgot what her name was, but she was, I feel at the time kind of an it, you know, I think she was in a lot. It felt like at that time. And then I had not seen her in anything for a long time. And I looked up she has a lot of credits, and she is on Fear the Walking Dead, which I've never seen.
That's how she's familiar to me. Because I watched that show for a while. I went to graduate school with Coleman Domingo, who's also on that show, which is what got me into that show. I wasn't in, we were in San Francisco at the same time. We weren't.
Kim Dickens is her name.
In class together. And I like Kim Dickens.
Yeah, she's good. But again, there's a lot of, and maybe this is why they're attracted to each other. I don't know, but there's a lot of, for all the quirky dialogue and dialogue that's meant to be very smart, there's a lot of them just kind of staring at each other.
Yeah.
And again, it's kind of like, what is
it's muddy, and she'll ask him something that's a sort of a double-edged question or a loaded question. And Bill Pullman will sit there and do what I call mouth acting. He'll go like, and then he'll say a line. And you're like, I didn't understand what any of that meant. You know, I don't know why I needed 5 or 6 seconds of you literally chewing over your thoughts. It didn't add anything. It just killed the scene, right? So then she takes him shooting. She's like, I know what we need to go out. So they go out to the woods, and she's got a handgun, and they're shooting cans, and she's like teaching him to shoot. And it's like teaching someone to play pool. You know, she steps behind him and she touches his arm, and the gun goes off, right? So it's played for, it's all messed up with, is this comedy or is this whatever's going on here? And right at the end of that, and he's sort of a lousy shot, and she teaches him, and then finally he hits a can, right? And then just as she's like, oh, you want to get the shotgun? And he's like, okay. So she goes around to the trunk, and while she's like away at the trunk, he hits
another can. Yeah.
Would just casually, like a crack shot, like like Clint Eastwood, he just goes and nails a can. And we see her catching that. But it wasn't clear to me. So was he
pretending?
Is he playing an act, like letting her teach him to shoot, so that I felt like the movie was that moment was supposed to be like, he is an excellent shot. He's a crack shot because he's great at everything.
Exactly. Yeah.
But he was master of disguising. But she saw that and layers its onions lit. And I'm just kind of like, come on, man. You know,
I don't know that
you're not that good a director then, I guess, to make that clear, because it
wasn't clear.
Muddy.
And I don't know that this guy understands human. He doesn't understand people enough to be like, oh, I'm going, for her sake, I'm going to pretend like I can't shoot. I don't know that he's that aware of other people's emotions and feelings enough to do that, you know?
Or if that's the story you're telling, that this guy can't relate with other people except in some sort of disguise, some sort of subterfuge, then that needs to be made clear. Then when he gets back to the hotel, we can't just see Bill Pullman like sit down on the bed like a guy who has been on a 12-hour flight, right? We need to see something where he is really exhausted. Like, we need to see specifically the toll that this is taking on a person who is capable of pretending to navigate society like an expert, whatever, but is actually, that's incredibly taxing on this person, you know? And I think there should be rituals, and it should be more like just ran a marathon and, you know, needs to sit down there. Maybe there's music, or maybe he does the amphetamine. You know, when he's off duty, he has to recover, and that wasn't clear either.
Yeah. There's also in the beginning of the film when we're introduced to him with Ben Stiller. Ben Stiller, he has a buddy that he talks to sort of throughout the film, where he kind of unloads on his friend about the problems that he has with this Zero guy. And he's telling him how he's like, he writes these horrible songs. So when he first goes to his penthouse, he's there in like boots and playing the guitar and singing this bad song. And they never go back to that again.
Nope.
So it's just like, what's the point of that?
And it is terrible.
Yeah.
Right. It's not so bad it's funny, right? It's not like, though, this guy's like, it's not comically terrible. It's just terrible. And so we, as I guess we're with Ben Stiller, we have to sit here and listen to him finish this terrible song. And Ben Stiller at that point in the movie, very early in the movie, we get the sense that Ben Stiller doesn't have the kind of relationship with this guy that he can be honest with him, or, you know, he just feels like, oh, I hate working for this guy. It's so exhausting and whatever. And then his wife says, why do you keep doing it? He's like, he needs me. I'm like, what does Ben Stiller get out of this? Yeah. We never see what Ben Stiller gets out of this, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And as you said,
I mean, money, but you know, he's a lawyer. He could.
Yeah, he left his law firm that he says in the beginning to go and work for this. I mean, I guess he's paying him really well because he lives in this big house in Los Angeles,
but that
with a swimming pool and everything.
Seem to ever be a motivator. And there's another point in which somebody offers him millions of dollars.
Yeah.
You know, and he's not enticed by the money. It isn't the money, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, you know, you brought up a good point. I think this would be if he is I don't know if it's psychopath or sociopath, where, you know, somebody who just does not understand other people's emotions at all. And if it were the only way that he can interact in a human way is to be playing a character, almost maybe in a way, this might not be a great analogy, but where, you know, performers, where somebody can get on stage and sing, but they can't have a conversation one-on-one with another person. The only way that they can have interaction with other people is to be on stage performing. Yeah. I think if they would have gone a bit in that direction and kind of fleshed that out a little bit, and for him to be almost like, I've never really had a real romantic relationship because I have to pretend to be somebody else.
Well, he sort of does. He says the only woman. And then I thought, to me, that's like, this is literally the only female relationship you've ever had. And you may have lost your virginity with this woman, which seems implausible as played by Bill Paxton. But I thought, again, on paper, what did I say? Bill Pullman.
Paxton. It's easy to make that. Yeah, they're.
I thought less than psychopath, because it's not that he lacks empathy, but something definitely on the spectrum, autism, right? Because there's the almost obsessive observing of human behavior and analysis and almost a savant-like tracking of details. That's very Sherlock Holmes like, right? The deductive, right? How did you know I was a paramedic? Well, I smelled the iodine. It has a very specific smell, right? And your hair was wet, so I thought that maybe you had worked the late shift and you had gotten wet, but you hadn't been home to shower yet to wash up the smell, and that's where I got. And I thought, not doctor, right? And he talks her through it like Sherlock Holmes would, that by the process of deduction and several little tiny clues, that the most logical thing was whatever. And all of that, you know, and that he's difficult to work with, and he's demanding, and he's megalomaniac and self-centered, and he's the center of his own universe. All of that made me think, well, but it would be difficult for me to imagine him playing the smooth con man that he does for a lot of this movie, if that was the case, because you can't turn that on and off.
Yeah. And it seems unlikely that, he's this tall, handsome guy with money, that it seems unlikely that he would have never had some kind of relationship at some other point in his life.
It would have been interesting if that was what they were going for. It would have been more interesting to delve into that. I mean, I don't know.
As you said, it feels much like a first film in that it seems like there's a lot of different ideas that don't necessarily all go together.
So I want to share something that I'm realizing, that I'm being a little snarky about this because I'm angry at the Kasdans for ruining Solo. Because Chris Miller and Phil Lord were going to make a great movie out of that, and they stepped in and they screwed it all up.
So
I didn't end up hating Solo, but I really wanted to see Chris and Phil's version of it.
Yeah.
And it was because the Kasdans were like, that's not the way you do it. So this kid is a rich kid in Hollywood whose dad was Lawrence Kasdan, and he got to make whatever movie he wanted. And this was the movie he made. And it feels like not untalented. I'm not going to say that there's nothing to appreciate here, but it feels spoiled, rushed, muddy, and entitled.
Yeah. Now, in fairness to him, you're not wrong with anything that you're saying there. He doesn't have anything to do with Star Wars, because so I looked at his IMDb today, and I thought he had been involved with Solo, and I thought he was writing a future Star Wars. But there's another Kasdan, Jonathan Kasdan is his brother.
Oh, yeah. It's his brother, does it?
Yeah. Okay. So he wrote.
Okay, I'm a jerk.
No.
Sorry, I love this movie.
No, but So Jonathan Kasdan wrote Solo with his dad, and this one didn't have anything to do with it. I
didn't know there were a bunch of Kasdans.
Yeah, I didn't know that either until today.
I thought it was just like Darth and Luke. Well, there's Leia.
Yeah. But also, as you said, if he were not Lawrence Kasdan's son, would he even be a filmmaker now? Maybe, but it certainly got, a foot in the door by being, and he has gone on to do he directs the Jumanji movies, and so he's pretty big now in his own right.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad movie. I didn't struggle to get through it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not Kill and Kill Again.
No.
It's
it's competently made.
It's competently made. I just feel like it's good enough that you really feel the parts that you think don't work, or the parts that it's good enough that I felt like I I got a sense of what they were going for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But also the guy, the main character's name is Daryl Zero. only so you can call the movie Zero Effect.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole reason why you named it. Why is his name anything Zero?
Yeah.
Calling him Daryl Zero makes fun of itself, right? And it's like, no, I mean it to be stupid. And you're like, well, why do you mean it to be stupid? Why don't you mean it to be funny, or mean it to be good, or mean it to be clever?
Yeah.
Right. And I just feel like that's a young person's spackle. That they're like, no, it's ironic. Well, it just reads as dumb.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
Zero Effect. It's pretty much what the movie left me with. Zero Effect. So would you recommend it to our viewers?
So I think, as I said kind of early on, I think I can imagine there being people watching this and not liking the Bill Pullman character. I could see people being really annoyed by him. Another thing that I kind of just thought of, there's no real antagonist in this movie. I mean, Ryan O'Neal is the closest thing to it, but he doesn't really do. He threatens not Bill Pullman, but Ben Stiller at one point, sort of. And he's a not great person. He's done really bad things, but they're working for him. And that's another, not to get sidetracked, but that's another thing where, I don't quite know what they were trying to convey there, but there's a point where Ben Stiller is like, this guy's a bad guy. And you don't, have much insight into this, but he's like, we work for all of these bad people. And Bill Pullman, he has sort of a monologue where he's like, there's no good and bad people, they're just our clients or whatever. You know what I mean? I think
there's no good guys, bad guys, just a bunch of guys.
Yeah, there was something, again, that felt like something that Jake Kasdan probably had some strong feeling about, but that still kind of goes nowhere, but
it's the closest thing to like a thesis monologue of like, this is what this movie's all about, right?
Yeah.
This is this movie's philosophy of life in the universe of this movie, but it was confusing. In fact, I think we even are attributing, I think it's Ben Stiller that says, I think Bill Pullman says, we're the good guys. And Ben Stiller says, there's no good guys and bad guys. It's just a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
And I think his point is that, and I don't like this guy whom we know did bad things, and I don't want to I don't want to be helping this guy who did bad things.
Yeah.
Right. It's not about, I don't want to be one of the bad guys. I want to be, but it was very unclear.
Like a lot of the film, basically. So I feel like, if you enjoy quirky, there's definitely some quirkiness to this. It's not a laugh out loud comedy. There's some, it's pretty subtle humor. And this is, I'm sure, a movie that a lot of people haven't seen. So if you want to see an early film with these actors, and also, I guess if you're a Jake Kasdan fan, I mean, like I say, he's gone on to do the Jumanji movies, but so I imagine if he had done this a little later in his career, or if this had been his fifth movie instead of his first movie, things probably would have been tightened up quite a bit. So it's kind of a marginal thumbs up for me. I didn't. It was one of those that I remembered liking it probably more than I did this time around, but it was literally about half of my life ago when I watched this. So, the first time.
I'm going to give it a thumbs horizon.
Yeah, sideways.
I don't really want to give it a thumbs down because we have watched some stinkers.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is a stinker. I just think it doesn't quite pull off what it feels like it's going for. And I really enjoyed seeing Ben Stiller, Ben Stiller.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed watching the actors perform. I just don't think the story was clear, and I want to lay that on the director instead of the actors.
There's a big revelation at the end, and I think you're supposed to be really sort of like everything came together and you're really shocked, and you're just kind of like, okay. I mean, did you feel shocked by that?
No, but I didn't find myself caring about anybody very much. I didn't find myself caring about any of the characters. I wasn't pulling for Ben Stiller and his marriage. I wasn't rooting for the detective. I wasn't rooting for the love story.
Mm-hmm.
I think she was most successful in coming off as a sympathetic character.
Yeah.
But a big rock ending is hard to achieve when you haven't built that audience bond with, it's stakes. So it looks good. And it's a pleasant, the world it creates is pleasant. It's kind of fun watching Bill Pullman for no reason in these disguises. But,
It's
but
in no way a bad film.
no, but it not
Muddled.
not so
Muddled is
entertaining
the right word
to
for it.
recommend it. If somebody's like, "Hey, what's a movie that I would want to sit down and watch?" I'm like, I'm not quite prepared to be like, you should watch Zero Effect.
Yeah.
But if you're like us, like I don't regret watching it. If you're like us and you're like into this kind of movie that we talk about, and you've never even heard of it, I'm getting it when you propose a movie that I have never even heard of. Like I get excited. Like you sent me the trailer for Saturn 3, and I was like, what? We have to watch this.
Yeah.
I don't know. Then I think you should check it out. Like I'm looking at the film festival stuff now, and these are not established filmmakers. These are, off the grid filmmakers. And sometimes they've made a film or two, but they're unknowns for the most part. And if I had gotten this film as a submission in the film festival, I'd have been over the moon.
Sure.
I mean, this is really professionally made. It's a union movie. It's got to be, right?
Yeah.
And it has its problems that I've been harping on along about, but it's so it comes down to what your expectations are of it, I guess.
It was Columbia Pictures, so it's not like this was
a studio movie, right?
Yeah, so, this wasn't even an indie,
But it does feel like someone's first movie.
Yeah.
And not someone's first studio movie. Someone's first movie. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah. It's definitely above it doesn't feel like a student film.
No.
But it would be somebody's first professional.
No, although if you told me this was somebody's like thesis project in film that they went back and rewrote and then the studio paid for it, I'd have been like, oh.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah. I would add another kind of an extra thing for me, I guess. I really like detective stories. I don't know if it was just, when we were kids, there were a million, you had Magnum PI and all these and a million other detective shows. And I've always been kind of into that, especially if it's kind of quirky. So that kind of adds a point or two for me. I don't know how, there's not as much detective stories. I think have gone a little bit out of
I wonder why.
Vogue,
you think it's the rise of the internet and digital and like all the CSI and forensic stuff that just makes DNA evidence that there's so much more concrete information that can be gathered now that just deduction and intuition and good old legwork.
It could be, yeah. And with this, they're using phone books and
payphones.
They're using payphones and everything. But yeah, that kind of and detective stories are a lot different from cop stories because it always seems to me like detectives always, even though a lot of times they're really smart, there's also this kind of, they're just sort of an everyman in a lot of ways, and
it's a day job.
It's a day job, and they're not.
That's a part of it. Heroes. Is that they can't leave their work. It eats at them, so they go home and they drink, and it's much more, SVU. It's like, this job's killing me. I get it, but it's a job that they're paid to do.
Right.
Whereas the PIs are kind of like, I don't get paid till I solve this thing, so that's the case in that they live and breathe it, work overnight and stake it out, fly over the country. And,
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I'm a sucker for those kind of stories too. So for next time, we talked about Nightmare Alley is on HBO Max now.
Yeah, and that's gotten mixed reviews, but I like the people in it. You want to just do that one? Because
I'm for sure.
I definitely want to see that movie anyway. So
now
that it's on HBO Max, let's do it.
Yeah, for sure. That was one that I really would have liked to have seen in the theaters, and it wasn't in theaters for all that long. And they actually, I was kind of hoping HBO Max would do this, but they briefly released a black and white version of it in theaters. And Guillermo del Toro, so it's a Guillermo del Toro film, and he said that they specifically, it wasn't like it was just color and they just made it grayscale or whatever. It was specifically lit and shot to be a color film and a black and white film.
Interesting.
So yeah, so I'm sure at some point the black and white version will hit streaming as well. So I would kind of like to, assuming I like it, I think I'd like to go back at some point and watch the black and white version.
Yeah.
So, but I've liked pretty much almost everything that Guillermo del Toro has done. So
yeah.
I figure it's going to be no pun intended up my alley. So
hopefully it won't be a nightmare.
Exactly. Hopefully it won't be a nightmare. But yeah, so
okay. So
and the fact that it's on HBO Max, anyway.
Yeah,
so.
there it is. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I am.
Anything else?
Have
you watched anything that you were
well, on your recommendation, I've been watching the also on HBO. We should get paid by HBO Max for plugging all their stuff so much, but the Peacemaker thing I have sort of surprised myself by kind of getting into. It is very juvenile. It is I hesitate to use this word, but it's almost offensively juvenile. The writing in it, everybody, including the women, talks like a 13 or 14-year-old boy. Right. So it's like if the Goonies all sat down and wrote a series and then cast professional adult actors, male and female. It's really, really like dumb, but it is funny.
Mm-hmm.
And John Cena is funny. It's weird. He's such a horse, there's all these close-up shots of his face, and his face just looks like, the only scene I can think of is like in that era of sci-fi, like Total Recall, where they would make an animatronic, someone's head would explode, or he'd be on Mars and the eyes would come out of it. It looks vaguely like Schwarzenegger, right?
Yeah.
But it's so clearly some synthetic thing in his head. And I'm like, John Cena looks like that. Like he's just, his whole head, his face, and it's all like meat. He's just and that's not to say he's a bad actor or anything. He's got good comic timing, and he's great. I got no problem with John Cena, but I just kind of like, it's the weirdest, ugly, because he's
just this big moose of a guy.
Yeah.
But he is really funny.
He looks like he's made out of ham.
Yeah. That's a good description.
He's just like he sewed up this skin suit. You just took whole hams and stuff them in this skin suit.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've been watching it, and it's disgusting and raunchy and wrong. And the opening title sequence is the craziest thing I have ever seen.
Yeah.
It's like a dance number, and it's like deliberately the dumbest choreography, and everybody's doing it straight faced, and it's just the stupidest dance, and it ends with an eagle. I mean, I don't know. Is
this eagle named Eagly or something like that?
His eagle is named Eagly. And his co-workers, the bit where they find out that his eagle is named Eagly, one of them says, "Did you name your dog Doggy?" And the other one says, "Did you name your daughter Daughtery?"
And honestly, I think it's better than Suicide Squad.
I think it's better than Suicide Squad. Yeah. Because it doesn't, it's that same mentality, but not, no studio got in the way and was like, look, we have to sell some tickets to this. They're just like, HBO's like, no, just you just do it any way you want. It's like, great.
And you can't imagine, like, I don't think this could get an R rating to be in a movie theater. Do you? I mean, it would be a hard R. You're
thinking of the sex scene, maybe?
Yeah, and yeah.
I mean, you could
maybe.
There's
I don't know.
real. I mean, they're both naked, and you see her breasts, but it's not. And the violence, I don't know. Yeah, I think again they might have to trim some little things here and there. I don't, the violence doesn't shock me. It's not like where I'm sitting there going like, oh, I'm never going to unsee that. It's cartoon violence and people sort of explode.
But you're right in that it definitely feels like they were just like, here's some money, do whatever you want to do. That there was just no interference with this at all.
Yeah. And he was just like, all righty then. Okie doke.
Yeah, so it for sure entertaining.
Yeah, I mean,
it's doing really, really well too.
It's not really even I don't like DC stuff, generally speaking. And I don't I liked the Guardians of the Galaxy. I like that a lot, and that's juvenile and Dumbo, but more mainstream. And this just drops you right down that juvenile Dumbo well. And at first I was like, I am right on the edge of whether or not I like this, but I was high one night and I watched the second episode and I started to like the characters. I started, despite all the stupid dialogue, I started to get invested in the characters, and that, so that it gets its hooks in you like that. For me, if I start to care about the characters, well, now I care, and
he does James Gunn is definitely talented in that regard. It could be just nothing but juvenile humor and you just don't care.
And that wouldn't be entertaining.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that, right? A lot of that type of thing.
But he's able to combine that with a heart that is, I think that's I'm sure hard to do.
Yeah. He starts by you going, oh, this idiot. And then you surprise yourself by being like, I actually feel kind of bad for him. That's kind of new to me because we've had the whole anti-hero where you're like, this guy is a monster, Tony Soprano. So why am I rooting for Tony Soprano? Right? Tony Soprano is a murderer. This is kind of the anti-hero is a moron. Right? He's not a monster as much as he's a moron. You're like, why would I care? Why would I care about this complete moron? But he gets you to somehow.
Yeah, exactly. Have you seen another show that you might like that's kind of a bit along these lines? It's another DC one, but have you seen Doom Patrol?
I started watching Doom Patrol.
Did you?
And it went the other way. I never started caring, never cared about the characters.
I watched the first season and I enjoyed it, and I think they're into their third or fourth season with that one. And I never, I didn't love it, but I thought it was pretty good.
I think I muscled my way through the first season just to sort of see where it was going. And then I maybe watched the first episode of the second season. I just kind of like, no.
Yeah.
But, it's got a following too.
Yeah. I mean, they're into their third or fourth season, I believe. So I think it's maybe coming back.
I've been meaning to watch Squid Game, which had a big following for a hot minute. I haven't gotten around to it yet.
Yeah, I know I've been told how it ends and everything, so I don't know that I'll ever get around to it. But
I did see Spider-Man.
Oh, okay.
I did see Spider-Man. I went down to New York City on one of my trips and had some free time, so I went and saw it in the theater.
And you enjoyed it?
Yeah, very much.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to catch that at some point and we'll talk about it. I don't know if it'll go to Disney Plus soon, or it will be a while, I guess. But I
think it's doing really well in theaters, and I think they make more money. So I think they will sit on that as long as they can, unless they already have some kind of contractual obligations. I don't know. You can Google that up.
They keep going back and forth as to whether he's going to come back. I keep seeing articles where it's like, oh, he's going to do several more. And then it's like, maybe he won't do another one. I think there's just so much money that they'll just keep throwing money at him until,
well, Robert Downey Jr. certainly taught agents that,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if this thing continues to make money the way it's continuing to make money, then they have leverage. Even if they've signed something. We'll sue you. Okay, sue us. wait, don't go.
Yeah.
It's like, so
Yeah. And we've got Batman coming up in a month or so.
yeah, that'll be interesting.
And that's going to be another one that's almost 3 hours. It's like just a few minutes
Oof.
short of 3 hours.
I think I'm just getting too old for the 3 hour movie. Like my
Yeah.
like physically my ass. I can't.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need a break.
Put
Walking around.
intermissions.
Yeah,
Put
exactly.
intermissions in movies like they used to. So.
Oh.
Well,
Okay, so
alrighty.
Chris saying ChrisTalkMovies@gmail.com. That is us. And you might be watching us on YouTube, or you might be listening to us on a podcast, or you might be right behind me. No, you're not. We're on the socials. You can reach us, and please do that and smash that like button. Subscribe. We're gonna do Nightmare Alley. It's another new one. Pretty new one. Won't you watch it with us and join us next week?
Won't you join us?
Won't you be my neighbor? So
alrighty.
And we didn't say it on the air, but happy belated birthday to
thank you,
Mr. Huddleston.
Thank you very much. Yes.
And yeah, that's it. So anything else to add?
No, I think that's it.
No, great. So we will talk to you next week, baby.